Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Grierson. I am the Senior U.S. Critic for Screen International. It's my great pleasure to bring to the stage the writer and director of Crossing, LEVAN AKIN.
Hi. If we sit here, do you see us if I sit down here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Otherwise we could go on the stage. Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations.
Thank you for having
me. And congratulations on the Teddy Award.
Thank you.
This premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, won the Teddy there in Berlin. So the first thing I wanted to ask about was your previous film was And Then We Danced, and you heard a story while making that movie that inspired this film.
Yes. Everyone hears me? Okay. Yeah. So there was like a big discourse around And Then We Danced, especially in Georgia, and they had like demonstrations and riots, and people were going crazy, and they had like the military were sent out, and the police, and they had like police officers in every cinema, and blah blah blah, weapon detectors too. And then the discourse was sort of like, oh, it's the Soviet generation versus the post-Soviet generation. It was like old against young. And it was like all of the old people are like bigots and they're horrible and blah, blah, blah. And all of the young are like Western, liberal, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So that made me think of like, it would be nice to make a movie from the point of view of like an older person who's like a relative of someone who's LGBTQI. And then also, while that all happened, there was this news in Georgia that became like this whole thing about like an old grandfather who supported his granddaughter who's trans, and like she'd been like kicked out of the family and blah, blah, blah. But he was like supportive of her, and that became like this whole thing that everybody was very impressed of. And then, yeah, that's how sort of this film grew.
Because obviously in Crossing, that's one of the storylines, Leah and her search for her niece. But there's also this lawyer. And I'm curious, did you, when you were starting to write the script, did you sort of always know there were going to be those two tracks of the story, or how did that second track develop?
It grew very organically, so I knew I wanted to do something on this topic. I knew that I wanted to go from Georgia to Istanbul because when I was doing And Then We Danced, I met these sex workers who were in And Then We Danced in one scene. And they told me that they would go to Istanbul to work. So I was like, that's interesting. And also I have like heritage in Istanbul, so I was like, it would be nice to combine the countries. And also I love Turkish music, so I was like, I always wanted to do something in Turkey. And then I started sort of exploring this topic, and while I was doing that, I was also, that's the nice thing about working from Sweden, because you can get like some money to do research and things. So I was doing research while I was writing the script. And then I met women like Evrim. So that sort of informed me, where I was like, this is interesting, I want to show a character like that in a film, because I hadn't really seen it myself. And I also felt like, so
And while you're working on the script and the script is changing and developing, did you always, once you met people who were like Evrim, did you always know that you wanted them to be sort of parallel stories? Because one of the things that's really beautiful about the film is we keep waiting. This is anticipation of them intersecting. Was it always that way when you were working on the script?
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky because I knew I had this like story I wanted to tell somehow, and I had these themes that I wanted to explore. And I'm like an involuntary writer because I, always wanted to be a director, and then I wouldn't get anything to direct, and it was just boring things. And then I was like, I have to write my own movies, and then I did. And then I had to do this movie because I knew that I wanted to show these spaces and places and these people, and then I had to come up with like a story. And you also have to have a script to get like financing, and the script has to be like a little entertaining. And I was able to be more free, like, And Then We Dance is much more classical story, like it's a hero and he goes on this journey, and we've seen sort of the shape of that story many times before, but not in the context that And Then We Dance was in. But with this one, I wanted to sort of explore other ways of telling the story, but I knew also that I didn't want them to just cross paths too soon, because we've seen that and it's boring. So the script is very much me like getting bored, and then I'm like, okay, let's leave these people now because I don't know what I'm gonna do with them in Istanbul, and let's go to Evrim because that's more fun. And then I go to her, and then I just jump back and forth. And then I felt like it would be nice if their meeting wasn't like this big dramatic thing. It happens just sort of like on the sidelines. He's like, I met a girl at a party and she said that she can help us, and then they just go to her office. I thought that was kind of neat. I don't know.
Yeah, and well, you've talked in the past about Italian neorealism being something that inspires you.
A lot.
And obviously, when you think about those kind of classic films.
Yeah, but also American films from like the 70s and even early 80s maybe.
Anything sort of like the new Hollywood era, or when you say 1970s, like?
Yeah, the new Hollywood era. I just, I love naturalism. Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things that I also really love about the film is many of the characters that we see are being played by non-actors. And this is not the first time that you've done that. Does it get easier in terms of having an eye for, I think that person would work well on camera, I think they could take direction?
I think I have a knack for that, actually. Because I love people. I mean, I'm sort of a misanthrope, actually. I don't really love people in one sense. It's very contradicting because I'm also afraid of people. But then on the other hand, when I meet characters, and oftentimes they're very complicated people, I'm also fall very much in love with them. So I'm very torn in this. This is the story of I can't really I can't settle in it somehow. So a lot of the actors, because I think they become actors as soon as they step in front of the camera, but a lot of them are also very complicated people, personally complicated. But they bring so much to the screen, so I think it's worth it, right?
So for instance, Evrim is a non-professional. So how does that happen? How do you find that person?
So this movie was really hard because it was the pandemic, and I couldn't really go to the place, because usually I go to spaces and I find people, for instance, and then we danced, many of them were one of the, the girl in this movie who's in the passport control, she's very short scene, but she used to work at a gay nightclub in Tbilisi, and she was in the door, and she was super rude to everyone, and she had a very nice personality. So she was in And Then We Danced, and then I cast her in this one too, because she just had an amazing presence. And then what was the question? Oh, Dennis. But this one, it was hard because there was no clubs and everything because it was the pandemic. So what we did was we had these ads on Facebook and stuff. So she answered one of those ads because her friend told her about it, and she'd always wanted, when she was in high school, she wanted to be an actress.
Oh, okay.
So she answered, and then she came in and auditioned for a very small part, and then she got the main role because she was so good.
What was the Facebook how do you describe what you're looking for in
I think that it wasn't me, it was our casting person who's also a trans man, and he just wrote we're looking for trans actors for a film that's going to be shot, it wasn't very specific actually, because we wanted as many people as possible to apply. Because sometimes when you're too specific, a lot of people are I don't think he even wrote age, because we needed so many also smaller roles.
Right.
So it was very broad.
Because so you're saying once you find the person and realize this is my Evrim, how much of the writing of that character changes once you know who that person is and get to know that person?
In this case, it didn't change a lot, to be honest, because now I'm going to tell a secret that nobody knows. Not a secret, but who cares? Nobody cares. But I just want to say that she got the role 2 days before we started filming.
Oh, wow.
And the first thing she shot was the scene where you see her butt. So she was she just stepped in and was a star. And she didn't she wasn't afraid of anything. But she got cast 2 days before, because we had another person who dropped off. And then I was oh yeah, but because I actually liked her more. So I was but she came later, so we had already cast, and then I was okay, let's take Dennis. Yeah. So it was very serendipitous.
Because by contrast, your lead actress, the one who plays Leah, obviously she's done a lot of work.
She's a theater actor. She was in a movie by Parajanov in the 80s. She was in Guram's Fortress. which is a film that I love. But then I think she was in like a small thing in the 90s. But otherwise, other than that, she's done theater only in Georgia. Yeah.
In terms of reaching out to her, did you have her in mind, or just through the casting process, this person?
This is also like, now I'm gonna give you another story. So the thing was, I was casting and casting and casting, and then I stopped the movie for a year, like because I couldn't find who I wanted, and I was like, it's better not to make the film if it's not the right people, and also I didn't feel like I was able to do enough research. So then I like paused, or like I quit the film actually. And my producers were very angry with me because they had gotten the financing and everything. And I was like, but I don't want to do it because it's just going to be a waste of time. And then I rewrote the script, and then I did more research, and I met more people. And then the character of Evrim grew more strongly. And then we cast the other two roles. And then we had a woman who was great in every sense of the word. But then when we started filming, she like had a block, like a mental block. So we filmed like for 2 days, and she didn't want to continue. Like she was just too over. She hadn't acted in a long time. She was like a dancer originally, and so basically we were like filming, and then we had to like shut down the film, and that cost a lot of money, and it was a horrible actually situation. And then somebody showed me an audition of Mzia, and I was like, why haven't I seen this woman before? Because she was exactly what I was looking for, exactly what I'd been asking for. And it turned out that my first casting person didn't like her. So like they had like this thing. So she never showed her to me. That's how it can be. So that was also like sort of just I don't know. I'm so happy that it happened. And yeah, so that's how. So she basically, we paused the film, and she was in the theater, so we had to wait for her, and then she came, and then like from one day to another, she started filming. So that shot in the beginning of the film when she's walking by the water, that was the first thing we shot with her.
I mean, I know that it was 2019 when And Then We Danced came out, and it took 5 years.
Yeah, that's why it took so long, because
yeah,
and there was a pandemic, and then I was being difficult maybe, but I also feel like it's like if it's not the right people in a film like this, then the film is not gonna reach the potential that it can reach. I mean, it's still, maybe, you never know. It's making movies is like how do you say, like a lot like Russian roulette. You never know.
But I understand that feeling of, if it's not right, then don't do it. But but beyond just your producers being, like you said, mad at you, I have to imagine there's some internal pressure of, what if this movie never happens? What if I never make this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this movie was difficult in that way, because everybody was like, And Then We Danced was such a success, so it was a lot of like, and mind you, all that I made that And Then We Danced movie without any money, because nobody was going to give me money for that movie. So we made that movie for like literally nothing. And the people at the Swedish Film Institute were like, nobody's going to watch this. This movie's going to suck. You're not going to get any money. And that just goes to show that nobody knows anything, right? But we still made that movie. And then when it did well, the Swedish Film Institute was very happy, of course. And then they were in like every opening. And they took so much, like even today, if you go into the website of the Swedish Film Institute, there's like a huge And Then We Danced. And they're like, it's like an example of successful films.
Right. They always believed in you. They knew.
Yeah. So when this movie, so this was easier. We got money easier, but it was a different process, because I wanted to do something different with this movie. But I don't know. It's hard, We all hustle to do our things.
Well, I also want to ask about the ending, because everyone's seen the ending, so I can ask you about it now. I love the ending so much, and you do something I think that is so rarely done well, where we see a scene that we want to see, and then it turns out it's just in the character's imagination. It's often done very, very poorly in movies, and you do it so well. I was wondering, did you always know that was your ending?
Yeah.
Like, you were never tempted to actually...
No.
And out of curiosity, why? Why did you know that?
Because
that was
I knew that I wanted to have that. I wanted to hear her say those words, because I know that for me and for other people in the region, and maybe from America too, I don't know, but like there's a lot of conversations that we've never been able to have with our elders or our mothers or fathers, like those words that people don't say. And it goes outside the sort of queer narrative too. Like I think a theme in this film and my last thing, and a theme of my life, because when I was younger, I directed a lot of TV in Sweden, and I felt like it was pointless. And then I started doing my own things, and then I always felt like I want every moment of everything I do to also feel meaningful to me. So I have this like idea of time that I'm very obsessed with, and like using your time in a good way, and also capturing time and spaces and people. Like I often meet people that are so charismatic, and I'm like, I want to share them with the world, you know. And I feel like with that dialogue, it was very, or monologue rather, it was very much like I want to hear those words, even if they're not real. I want to just hear them, because I think that, you know, if images are so powerful, so if you see it, maybe you will think like, okay, I'm gonna call someone or something, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that was very much part of, from the beginning.
Yeah, because it works so well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I think it's a genuine surprise and so bittersweet, because I don't think people are expecting that in that moment. If anyone in the audience has questions, I'd love to. Yes, right up top.
How did you decide on the name? Was it just the name, or is there maybe some...
No, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's an old, like, Greek Orthodox name, and it's fairly common in Georgia. Not too common, actually, but I like the name, and it also reminds me of a Swedish name called Katla, which Astrid Lindgren had in one of my favorite books called The Lionheart Brothers. Astrid Lindgren wrote the Pippi Longstocking, and she has a dragon in a book that's a very evil but cool dragon called Katla. And I always thought Katla and Tekla were sort of similar, so that's why I decided on Tekla.
Anyone else? Right there, yes.
Yeah, because I love the movie.
Thank you.
I love the Turkish music, where there's just so many things about food, you know, everything. But I'm curious about, you know, just this is a cultural thing. Maybe you speak to it a little bit, but I mean the whole trans thing in you know, it's already controversial enough in the United States and Western countries.
Because when you say Muslim countries are so diverse, just like Christian countries, or whatever you want to call it. So Turkey is very special because it was the Ottoman Empire, and then it became the Republic, and then it became super secular, and you couldn't wear a headscarf, and you had to learn the European alphabet and blah blah blah, and women had to vote and go to school and all these things, which happened with Atatürk. And then, with Erdogan, it sort of went more. But like Erdogan's Islam is a very capitalist. Like it's he just builds malls, and it's very sort of, it doesn't really. He's not a. I don't want to say too much, but he was very pro LGBTQ, by the way, when he was elected. And there's even speeches with him talking about how, they had pride parades up until, I think, 2015. So I think it wasn't until it was politically motivated for him to start that, similar with Putin, actually, but Putin is a different story. But Turkey is very diverse, and Istanbul, Izmir, Ankara, which are the big cities, are incredibly, you could make 50 different movies about Istanbul, and it would look in 50 different ways. To answer your question, also, one of Turkey's biggest pop stars ever, and she became super big from the 80s, and she's very close friends with Erdogan, is a trans woman. So there is this, it's similar to America in that way. You know how, like, with Britney Spears, she was supposed to be like a virgin, but she was like super sexual. It was like this hypocrisy. I think Turkey and America are very similar in their culture of like sort of what you show and what you really are, and how people perceive you. And it's the same in Turkey. Like, you can be trans or gay or whatever, as long as you don't, as long as you're not sexually threatening, it's okay. So it's like a different culture, I would say. It's not as black and white. So that's also why, you know, when they try to have a pride parade in Georgia and they went out in like tube tops and mini skirts and like pink clothes and like glitter, everybody like attacked them, because it doesn't work as it does in the West. Like, it's a whole different way. Like, the context is different. Now I'm talking too much, but yeah. But you know what, you understand what I'm saying. It's very different. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, right here.
Hi.
I'm actually Turkish.
Merhaba.